Hey there. This is David from Bodyworks DW coming to you live for the first time in a little while. And I am going to be attempting to do this about every Friday, 11:30, talking about how to have a thriving massage therapy practice. A little bit about me to maybe make you think that that might be worth listening to. I have a practice now of 17 years in the field, and I have two locations in New York City with about 25 therapists working under me. It's grown from me just being private practice about 16 years ago, all the way up to now, where, yeah, we have two locations. We're one of the bigger studios in New York City. And so I've done some videos before from my office, a little bit more produced, and it was a little hard to keep up with. So I wanted to find a format where I could easily share some really valuable information, help you learn how to keep clients and retain them, and basically do this in a way that's easily manageable for me, with also running a big company with 30 plus employees and still seeing clients 2 days a week. So I sort of settled on my home office, right in front of the computer, and just being able to get live on YouTube every week and just talk about various skills. So, the last video that we put out from a few months ago, I talked a lot about first impressions skills. Today, I want to talk more about intake skills. And, every once in a while, I'm going to look down at my notes. Um, but I want to review the sort of 5 stages of rebooking from the very first video. Again, first impressions, like how you come across to a client both online and then when they first walk in the room and meet you. Then there's intake skills, which is now that we've actually settled in and they've gotten that first impression. How are you going about trying to find out what they want out of a massage and then be able to determine how to create a great treatment for them that will give them what they want? Then there's the actual treatment. And of course, we teach continuing education and actual massage courses at our studio on massage skills. And there's plenty of those, but there's also skills that you can employ while you're doing treatments in terms of communication that will help you sort of create that long-term relationship with a client, and also think about like what future sessions with the client would look like, and be able to do that in a smooth way that doesn't feel real pushy or salesy. So then there's treatment outtake, which a lot of therapists don't spend a lot of time on, but I really think is an important part of the process. After you've finished a treatment and hopefully given them decent results, a lot of clients don't always check in internally or have the kinesthetic awareness to understand that you've actually improved them. So spending some time in outtake, checking in with them, getting them to really notice the differences in their body is really important. If you hear that cat in the background, that's Bernadette. She might jump on the desk every once in a while and come say hello. Maybe today, maybe not. We'll see. And then after outtake, presumably, hopefully, you've rebooked your client to a future session. But if you haven't, there's a whole skill set called following up, where you can check in after the session and see how the client's doing, see what their results are, and at that point, hopefully, create a relationship with them and retain them. A little bit about retention. It's not possible to retain 100% of the clients that you see. You're not going to match with everybody. Not everybody's going to love the work that you do. But after 17 years in the field, I took a look the other day, and I apparently retain about 80% of the clients that I see for the first time. At least they will come back within the first 90 days or so. So, and a big part of that is like really systematizing the way that I go about it, and not trying to figure out what way to communicate with each different client, or try to suss out right from the get-go whether I think that they're going to rebook or not, because that generally gets in the way. And it's much easier to think about yourself as a healthcare professional whose job it is to come up with a reasonable recommendation for their health, offer that recommendation. And then once you've offered it, the client gets to say yes or no. But if you don't offer it, they don't always know what to do. And a lot of clients wonder whether they should come back. And the fact that you're not asking them to come back actually makes you seem less confident about what you're doing. And rather than coming off as pushy, like a lot of therapists worry about, the not asking actually creates a weirder impression than the asking does, in my opinion and in my experience. But today, so we've talked a little bit in past videos about first impressions. We've talked a little bit about the overall concept of these stages of rebooking. Today, I want to get a little bit more into intake skills. And this is definitely going to take multiple videos. There are a dozen or so that I've got listed, and I don't want to cover them all today. So today, I want to really just highlight one really important skill, which is knowing when to employ open ended questions that are very broad and allow the client to have the ability to communicate openly about their situation, and close ended questions that really are designed to help you get a definitive answer from the client. And there is a good reason to have both of them comfortably under your belt, and they both have different uses and situations. um, when you're doing intake with a client, i.e., you're trying to find out what their issue is and how you can help them, it's definitely best to employ open ended questions, and certainly at first. And so I want to talk a little bit about like what it would take to retain a client, which basically is you determine what the client's needs are. You establish that your skill set and your abilities might be able to help them. You actually help them in treatment. And then you help them to understand how you help them and feel it in their body, and explain how future sessions might even make that improvement last longer or get better or deal with multiple issues. And once you've done those four things, you're going to have happy clients who are willing to come back and want to come back. If you miss any of those stages, and intake is where you determine what a client needs and establish how you can help them, right? If you don't spend enough time doing that and just let the client get on the table and then run the show and tell you what they want, they're not going to look at you as the authority. Hold on a second. Hey, Bernie, come here. I'm telling my cat to stop. Um, so, when you determine what a client needs, how we go about doing that is really where we're going to talk about today. So, the easiest way is to ask very open-ended questions at first. And so one of my go-to questions when a client first walks in the door and I've greeted them and I've sort of made them feel comfortable and sat across them, and in the first impressions video, I talk about how to do that and establish your authority without domineering, and actually creating the situation where you have two equal people, but they're looking at you as the person who can help them. So then once you've established that, you can start with a very simple open-ended question. And the one that I often ask clients is just, what brings you in today? And that is a very broad, open-ended question that allows them to go after a whole bunch of different answers. One, they might give you a laundry list of their symptoms and their pain. Some clients might say, oh, I just wanted a nice massage. I'm known as a pain management specialist. So you'd think I might ask the first question as like, where are you hurting, or what kind of pain are you feeling? But I want to establish it even more broader than that at first, just in case somebody didn't bother to read up on me on the website and just searched around Google and found our reviews online and said, oh, this seems like a good place to get a nice massage. So by asking just what brings you in today, I'm offering them the option of being able to say a bunch of different things, right? Now, most people who come to see me have some sort of pain issues. They've been sent to me by their friends and family who have worked with me before. So usually then they'll start to tell me where it hurts, what their issues are, potentially some of their case history. I had a session last night with somebody who had cancer in their left hip, which was removed, and thankfully they're in remission and not bothering with it anymore. But in the whole process of dealing with that, they actually had to detach their hamstrings and then surgically reattach them. And so, of course, even 8 years later, after a bunch of physical therapy, they're still dealing with some left hip issues. And I got all of that just in response to that very first question, what brings you in today? Right. And so then I was able to start narrowing the question. So let's say you ask very open-ended questions at first, and you start to get some information, and it starts to paint a picture of what might be causing their current pain, right? Because this client still had some lingering issues with the hip after all this time. Then you can start to do what I call cold reading, which is in essence taking a very broad question and starting to narrow it down such that uh, you start to get at an answer about why their pain might exist. Right. So you start with a very broad, open ended question, which is, what brings you in today? And let's say our client from last night said to us, well, I had cancer and my hamstrings were surgically reattached, and I definitely get constant left hip pain. My next question was, how often does the pain show up and what kind of pain is it? Right. And so that's starting to narrow, but it's still broad enough that they can give me a wealth of information from that. They could tell me that the pain's constant, or that it's intermittent, or that it only shows up with certain activities. They can tell me the pain's mostly achy, or if it's very sharp, or if sometimes it's sharp, sometimes it's achy. All of that helps me determine what their needs are and what they're hoping to get out of a session. And then, as I start to get some answers from the client, this client told me, I have relatively constant achy pain with intermittent sharp pain, right? Then I can start to ask about activities. I can narrow the question stream a little bit more and just check in. So, does it show up with certain activities, or does it show up when you're sitting? Does it show up when you're standing? And those kinds of things can give me an idea of which muscles are involved, which patterns are involved, which fascial lines are involved, because I can start to relate the pain that they're feeling with the anatomy and with the fascial planes and with the joints. And I can start to determine from there, oh, okay. And so in that process, I started to get a little bit more information. The client would then say, I also have right big toe pain, right? So that gave me some diagonal spiral line information that there's a cross pattern between the left hip and the right foot. And that also let me know, and I started to ask about, does it also show up in your right shoulder, which is another diagonal fascial line away from the left hip? And lo and behold, the client was like, now that you mention it, yeah, that is true. I do feel that way. I do get right shoulder pain. So that then gave me, so I started with that broad question, what brings you in today? They started to tell me a lot. And then I started to narrow the questions. Okay, I hear that you've got pain here, 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 and here. How often does it show up? What kind of pain is it? As they started to relay those answers, I was able to narrow the question even further down to specific activities, specific postures. We got a story about how she's on construction sites as a manager all the time and up on ladders and having to balance on one leg on ladders. Definitely useful information. That really helped me to then go to the next stage of my intake process, which would be to have them stand up, do a body reading, do a postural alignment analysis. And by then, I was really able to take all that information and note that, for instance, their torso leans slightly to the left, and that had the right foot not rolling properly through the ball of the big toe, and that also created a situation where the right shoulder was hanging out, not really feeling supported because it didn't really have the rib cage under it. And all of that really made it easy for me to look at her body and come up with a treatment plan, and then have that treatment plan really make a difference. So, the real takeaway is to think about and script for yourself a number of open ended questions. The first stage: what brings you in today? How did you find out about us? What would you like to get out of today's session? Those kind of things, which are very broad. And then start to narrow them as you get information from the client. But by asking that really big, broad, open ended question, you're inviting the client to really open up to you and just creating a space for them to do that. So that's today's skills takeaway. I'm going to be trying to do this about every Friday, 11:30 a.m. to roughly 15-20 minutes, something like that. Depends. I'm going to cover different skills each and every time. If you have any questions, you can totally check out in the comments and look in the description below. We also offer a continuing education workshop for massage therapists at our studio, both live, webinar, and soon on demand on our website. You can look below for links. To see the whole process that I'm talking about of rebooking and sort of treatment planning, we do a webinar about every 2 months called Connecting the Dots. And that's actually where I was working with that client last night, and got their information. And that basically allows you to see almost the entire process. You don't quite get the first impressions because they'll walk in the door before we start filming. But after that, you'll get to see a full intake, body reading, treatment design, how I go about negotiating and enrolling the client in my treatment plan, and then actually having the treatment on camera so you can ask questions, and then doing an actual outtake and giving the client some homework and talking about what further sessions would look like. And those run about 2 hours. They're actually approved for credit for New York State and for NCB and TMB nationally. And we have a number of them that are soon to be available online, but we have a next one coming up in November, and links for that will be again down below. So, hope you enjoyed this. I'm going to try and do this on the regular every week, and just continue to talk about these skills that will help you really improve your massage practice and really feel like you've got a thriving practice that's complete and your schedule is full and that you're really working with the clients that you want to work with. Hope you had a great time, and